A cardiologist sits down at his laptop after a 12-hour shift. He spent the day making split-second decisions that kept people alive, reading data under pressure, staying calm when everything was on the line. He opens his trading account, looks at a setup, and loses $4,000 in 11 minutes. Not because he's careless, not because he's lazy, because the exact intelligence that makes him brilliant in an operating room is quietly working against him at a trading desk. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why that happens to smart people specifically, not despite their intelligence, but because of it. Here's the part that should bother you if you've ever assumed intelligence was the answer. If being smart were enough, the smartest people in every field would dominate trading, and they don't. Doctors, engineers, lawyers, PhDs, some of the most consistently unprofitable retail accounts belong to people who are brilliant everywhere else in their lives. So if intelligence isn't the missing ingredient, what actually is? Keep that question open, because the answer explains something most trading advice gets completely backwards. Most people assume expertise transfers. Get good at thinking clearly in one domain, and that clarity should carry over anywhere you apply it. This is exactly the assumption that quietly wrecks smart traders, and it's wrong for a very specific, well-documented reason. This is where the research of psychologist Robin Hogarth becomes essential. Hogarth spent years studying how people learn from experience, and he found that learning environments split into two fundamentally different types. In what he called a kind learning environment, the feedback you get is accurate, immediate, and clearly connected to your actions. A surgeon knows almost instantly whether an incision went well. A chess player sees the board react to every move with total clarity. Repeated experience in that kind of environment reliably builds real expertise because the environment is, in a sense, teaching honestly. Then there's what Hogarth called a wicked learning environment, and trading is about as wicked as they come. Feedback arrives late, it's often misleading, and the relationship between a good decision and a good outcome is loose at best. You can take a terrible trade for all the wrong reasons and get rewarded with a win. You can take a perfectly reasoned trade and get punished by randomness that had nothing to do with your judgment. In a wicked environment, experience doesn't reliably build skill. It sometimes builds confident, well-practiced bad habits instead, because the environment never corrected them. Hogarth's own examples outside trading make this easier to see clearly. He pointed to fields like emergency room triage as kind, where a nurse's instinct about severity gets confirmed or corrected within minutes. He contrasted that with fields like long-range weather forecasting or stock picking, where the feedback loop is so slow and noisy that even decades of practice can leave someone no more accurate than when they started, while feeling considerably more confident. The unsettling part isn't that wicked environments exist, it's that they don't announce themselves as wicked. They look and feel exactly like any other domain where practice should be paying off. Here's why that matters so specifically for smart, successful people. Their entire professional life has trained them inside kind learning environments, where working hard and getting smarter reliably produces better outcomes. They bring that exact expectation into trading, a genuinely wicked environment, and the expectation itself becomes the trap. When a wrong decision accidentally pays off, their brain logs it as a validated skill, the same way it would in medicine or law. They're not being careless, they're applying a learning strategy that has served them brilliantly everywhere else in the one environment where it quietly backfires. There's a second piece of research that makes this even sharper. Psychologist Philip Tetlock spent 2 decades tracking the actual accuracy of expert predictions across economics, politics, and finance, comparing confident, credentialed specialists against much simpler baseline models. What he found became one of the most cited findings in the entire field of judgment research. On average, the experts performed barely better than chance, and in many cases, their confidence had no meaningful relationship to their actual accuracy at all. The professionals with the most credentials weren't necessarily the most accurate, they were often just the most certain, which turned out to be a completely different thing. What made Tetlock's work more than just a criticism of experts was what he did next. He ran a follow-up project specifically to find out whether accurate forecasting was even possible, and if so, who was actually good at it. The people who consistently outperformed everyone else, including seasoned professionals with decades of experience, weren't defined by their credentials or their raw intelligence at all. Tetlock's research found something else worth sitting with. The traders and forecasters who performed best shared a specific habit instead. They updated their views quickly and without ego when new evidence contradicted them. They thought in probabilities rather than certainties, and critically, they treated every prediction as something to be scored and revisited later, rather than defended. Intelligence didn't predict accuracy. That particular habit of thinking did. Put these two findings together, and the cardiologist's 11 minutes make complete sense. He walked into a wicked learning environment carrying the instincts of someone trained entirely by kind ones, expecting effort and expertise to be rewarded on a reliable timeline, and expecting his own confidence to be a meaningful signal of being right. In medicine, both of those instincts are assets. At a trading desk, they're liabilities dressed up as competence. If you've ever noticed that your worst trading decisions were the ones you felt most certain about, this is exactly why. And if that's landing right now, this is a good point to hit like and subscribe, because there's a specific practice coming up that directly counters both of these traps, and you'll want it before your next session. So how do you actually trade well inside an environment that's rigged to mislead confident, capable people? The fix isn't becoming less intelligent, obviously. It's borrowing the specific habit Tetlock's best forecasters used and applying Hogarth's insight about where you actually are. Start by explicitly labeling every trade idea as a probability, not a conviction. Not "this will work," but "this has roughly a 60% chance based on what I can currently see." That single shift changes what a loss means. A probabilistic 35% trade that loses isn't a mistake to defend. It's an outcome you already priced in. Then build in a deliberate review that happens on a schedule, not when you feel like it, and not only after a big win or loss. Tetlock's research found that forecasters who reviewed their calls regularly, win or loss, improved measurably faster than those who only revisited decisions when something went dramatically wrong. Reviewing only after disasters means you're only learning from the loudest signal in a very noisy environment, which is exactly the kind of misleading feedback Hogarth warned about. There's a reason this scheduled review matters more than it might seem. In a kind learning environment, the environment itself nags you into reviewing because feedback shows up immediately whether you ask for it or not. A wicked environment does the opposite. It lets weeks of quietly accumulating bad habits pass without a single moment that forces you to look. The schedule is standing in for the honest feedback the environment refuses to give you on its own. And when a bad decision happens to work out, and it will, resist the pull to log it as proof you were right. Write down specifically why the outcome was good luck rather than good judgment if that's genuinely what happened. This feels unnatural precisely because it goes against the learning instinct that served you well in every kind environment you've ever operated in. That's exactly why it needs to be deliberate instead of automatic. Do this consistently, and something shifts that intelligence alone never could. You stop treating a string of wins as validation and a string of losses as failure. You start treating both as data points in an environment that was never going to give you clean, honest feedback in the first place, which means your judgment finally gets to improve based on something more reliable than how confident or embarrassed you happen to feel that week. So think back to that cardiologist 11 minutes into a loss he couldn't fully explain to himself. He wasn't missing intelligence. He was missing the recognition that the rules that built his expertise everywhere else in his life were quietly working against him in the one place he assumed they'd transfer automatically. Once you see trading as the wicked environment it actually is, the losses stop feeling like a referendum on how smart you are and start looking like exactly what they are: data from a system that was never designed to reward confidence in the first place. If this changed how you'll think about your next trade, tell us in the comments the moment you were most confident and most wrong. Hit like and subscribe for more of this. Thanks for watching.